I'm lucky enough to be part of a great scripture study group that meets early on Saturday mornings. And if you're not someone who has the opportunity to meet in a small group to study the scriptures and to talk about the ideas that you might have about God and how to live like Him, I would strongly advise and suggest you find a group. It's not that complicated of an action to take. All that you really need to do is find at least one other person, preferably one or two, and then agree that you're going to get together for a set amount of time and read the scriptures. And just doing this will provide you so many opportunities to learn more than you otherwise could. One of the reasons for that is because other people in your group will have a different set of experiences. They will have learned different things from God, and they will have different questions. And sometimes we think that we're always looking for answers, but in reality, what you're actually looking for is questions, because it's the questions that are the key to knowing where to search to find the right answers. And they're the chain of the answers. They're the chain that shows you how to get to your answer. And so we've had this discussion this morning, and it was on the topic of, well, it eventually became the topic of how to become like God or overcoming the world was part of it. And it's sort of been echoing around in my head all day. And so I wanted to share with you some of the thoughts that I had and some of the things that I've learned over time. And so when we think about what it means to overcome the world, it's helpful to take a step back and ask what you're really looking for. And I believe that what people are actually looking for when they talk about this most of the time is they're looking to have an inner state where they feel peace and rest and joy, and that they don't feel stress or pain or suffering. And this can be useful, but the path to getting to the state where you no longer have stress and always have peace is not found through the way that the world would sell you the bill of how to do that. So you might be thinking a lot, and it's very common in culture today to talk about things like safe spaces. So a safe space is ostensibly a place that you can go where there aren't any troubles or pains or suffering, because all of those things have been removed from the vicinity. You know, it's a for kids, it could be a quiet room with happy looking posters and soft blankets and sheets or whatever, and cushions, and you sit down and you just feel all soft and warm and cozy. And the problem is that no real place like that actually exists for any long amount of time. Those are temporary solutions at best, and at worst, they actually are robbing you of all the things that you need in order to actually find the peace. So you cannot arrive at peace through avoiding problems. And that will actually, if you take that route, eventually you will run out of problems to avoid, and you will have no freedom of movement, no freedom of being. And anything that comes along will have the power to take away your peace. So, wrapped up in all of this is really what God's purpose is for us. And there's lots of ways that you could summarize what God's purpose is. One helpful way to summarize it is that his purpose is to help us to become as much like him as possible. Another way you could say that, because they're coupled, is he wants us to have as much joy as we're willing to receive. And joy actually comes from being like him. But I don't think it's specific enough. And so, a way that I've been thinking about how to summarize what God's purpose is in an ideal setting is that he wants to teach you to become so strong that no matter what problem you're currently faced with or walking through, you can't lose your joy or your peace or your focus or your purpose. You don't lose your stride even in the presence of massive problems. Because it's actually not the case that you get peace by avoiding pain and suffering. You get peace by learning how to maintain your peace and composure in the presence of those things. Now, there are a million metaphors that can be brought up in this regard. I'm partial to a weightlifting metaphor myself, and it should be pretty obvious from weightlifting that if you're really weak, someone might hand you a relatively light amount of weight and it might feel heavy and hard to move. It might stress your muscles. It might cause a stimulus enough to grow, actually, which is important. But if you get really strong and someone hands you a light weight, it's like it's not even there. You don't even notice it or feel it at all. In fact, today I was at a friend's house and I've been doing a ton of kettlebell swings with a fairly heavy kettlebell and trying to do at least 100 swings a day for weeks and weeks and weeks. And my friend had a 5-pound kettlebell. And, for a laugh, I did a couple of swings with this 5-pound bell. And it literally felt like it wasn't even in my hands. And that was just a really physical way of explaining this principle. But the point is, once you get to a certain level of strength, things that would challenge someone who are weaker or who would take away their peace no longer take yours away. And it works exactly the same way in problems in the world. You don't overcome them by avoiding them. You overcome them by getting stronger than them. And that way, even if the problem itself doesn't leave you, its ability to harm you does. And you begin to walk through it with joy. And you get to know a little bit more about what it means to be like God, who walks through all of the problems. He sees all of the problems of all of the world all at once. He's aware of all of the sin. He sees all of the suffering. He sees the things that he can do things about. He sees the things that he can't do things about. And regardless of those things, he has the ability to maintain his peace and his cheer and his joy. And those things overcome whatever the severity of the problem is. And that's why Jesus said in John 16, he said, "These things I have spoken unto you, that in me you might have peace. In the world ye shall have tribulation, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world." And you should ask yourself, what does it mean that in me you might have peace? What that means is that in the way that he is, that he will show you how to be, you will find the ability to walk through the tribulation of the world, even though you have it. You have tribulation while in the world, you can still be of good cheer because Jesus has overcome the world and he can show you how to do it too. And that's what he wants to do. So what does the process actually look like to start to gain additional peace and rest and focus in the face of and even during the greatest and hardest trials you've ever faced in your life? Well, there's a certain kind of therapy that's called exposure therapy. And this is really an interesting read. I would highly recommend looking up articles or videos about this, about people. I think there's a great Jordan Peterson video out there somewhere about some clients that he worked with in his clinical practice who had to go through exposure therapy, and they were afraid of things. People with phobias, right? They're afraid of things like riding on elevators, or a woman that was deathly afraid of snakes. And we're talking about people who are so afraid that they can't even be in the same room as a snake. And it turns out that the way that you get over a huge phobia like that is by incremental exposure to the thing that scares you. And so in the snake example, you convince someone to take the smallest possible step, which is, hey, we're going to have the snake in a box and you need to come in a room and you're 20 feet away from it. And you're going to sit in a chair and the snake's going to be in its box and you're just going to look at it. And they have to sit in that state, which is right at the edge of their fear, and acclimate to that state. And then they slowly, over time, inch closer and closer and closer until, eventually the woman actually touches it or handles the snake and she's no longer afraid. And I think Peterson would say something like, it didn't get any less scary. She just got braver. And that's kind of how it is. It's not the troubles and the problems and the trials don't really go away necessarily. You just get better at handling them. And you should be able to look over the course of your life and realize that when you were 12 or when you were a kid, that there were things that you do now every day that would have totally overcome you. Most 9-year-olds can't keep a hard schedule and make sure the laundry gets done and cook dinner for a family and make sure their kids get to school or whatever. But adults do that, and it's not that big of a deal for some of us. So that ability to grow beyond problems in your life, it doesn't have a limit necessarily in terms of how far that can go. And the purpose of it is for the Lord to take you all the way through greater and greater trials until there's nothing left that can take away your peace or your stress. And he does that through exposure therapy, through exposing you to greater and greater problems. And as long as you trust him and seek him, he can teach you the knowledge and information that you need in order to overcome the problem. I see this in the workplace a lot. This is the example that came to mind. So in my job right now, the focus has gotten progressively bigger and more complex over time. And every time I feel like I'm a little overwhelmed or like there's too much complexity, if I seek the Lord and seek to know what to do, it's not that I want him to take away my job or take away the stress or take away the work. It's I want him to show me how to do it in a way where I don't have those problems anymore. I don't have that lack of peace. And what's usually lacking on my end is some kind of knowledge. I need to get better at organizing information. I need to get better searching out topics, or I need to become more expert in a certain task or skill. And when you go search for those things over time, all of a sudden the things that were scary and that were hard and that were stressful no longer are. And that can happen at every step of your life, in every context of your life. You should go through your life and look at everything that causes you stress and lack of peace and anxiety and pain and suffering. And you should write those things down, every single thing, and don't miss anything. And then progressively, you should go to the Lord and say, Lord, I see that this thing causes me pain and suffering and stress, and I don't know how to overcome it. And I want to learn how to overcome it so that it can no longer bother me. And will you please teach me how to overcome it? And if you pray that prayer in sincerity and you really mean it, then you pay attention to the thoughts that will come to your mind, to the ideas that come to your mind, and to the people that knock on your door or walk in your office or come to your house or bump into you on the street, because these will be people sent by God, and they will come to you and they will say things that you need to hear. And if you're looking for those things, you'll hear them. And then if you implement them, that will be the knowledge that you need to overcome. And this happens every day, all day long. And I promise you it does. I've seen it happen in my life over and over and over again. And exponentially so the more that I intentionally sought out this process. And it is intentionally seekable by everybody who will sincerely come to the Lord in the full purpose of their heart. So I promise you that if you're one of these people who's seeking to overcome or to avoid pain and suffering, that is not the path. You certainly can have those things and you can avoid those things most of the time temporarily, but it's by far a lesser blessing to be removed from a trial or to avoid a trial. It's much greater to learn how to stand in that fire and to make it so that it doesn't burn you and that there is no pain even in the midst of it. Because then no matter when that thing comes back, it'll be as if it doesn't matter at all. And what greater blessing can you ask for than that? And that is truly what it means to have peace in Jesus, is to learn to be like him enough that there is nothing in this world that can take away your joy.